Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, thousands of researchers and student employees who work for the University of California are on strike. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Today, picket lines went up at all 10 UC campuses across the state with demands for more pay and fair labor practices. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has more from UC San Diego.
What do we want? Fair contract! When do we want it? Now!
You could hear it loud and clear just about everywhere on the La Jolla campus this morning. Each one of these strikers works for UC San Diego. They are unionized members who are postgraduate and doctoral scholars, academic researchers, and teaching assistants. Catherine Metcalf is one of them.
I'm out here striking because the university has been bargaining with us in bad faith for months. We need a fair contract.
Metcalf and the other 7,700 academic workers on this campus teach most of the students who attend classes while also doing research.
The university has committed a number of unfair labor practices, including bargaining with individual units outside of our union. These are explicitly illegal and they are not fair.
Shut it down! Shut it down!
These instructors say they will stay on the picket lines and out of their classrooms until they have a new contract. The labor dispute is also about more money and better working conditions. They say they have students on their side.
That our working conditions are their learning conditions. My students are standing in solidarity with me and the other graduate workers whose classes they attend. They know that the situation that the university has put us in is unfair, and they know that we have to fight together to show the university that without us, this university is not run.
One thing's for sure, this strike did not happen overnight. Postgraduate union members have been negotiating with the university for almost a year. As for a response from the university, there's just a written statement. It comes from the UC President's office speaking for all campuses. It says in part, the University of California continues to negotiate in good faith as we do everything possible to mitigate the impacts of any strike actions on our student learning. The university looks forward to continuing negotiations in good faith with the UAW and settling these contracts as quickly as possible so that important learning and vital research at our locations may continue.
It just reflects how it's like the wages that we live are barely afford us to be live at a sustainable level.
Deepak Pant is just getting started at UCSD as a teaching assistant and biology researcher. He's afraid he won't make it to graduation.
There's no safety in the sense that if you're always thinking about if you're always living paycheck to paycheck, it's so much harder to do impactful research.
The impact of this strike will be determined by how long it continues. MG Perez, KPBS News.
San Diego hospitals are preparing for what could be a busy winter. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says there are still worries of a triple-demic with COVID, the flu, and RSV cases surging at once.
So far, this flu season is hospitalizing Americans at a rate that we haven't seen in a decade.
We are on the upswing of things.
Dr. William Sang with Kaiser Permanente San Diego says they've been seeing more San Diegans coming to the emergency room with flu-like symptoms. They're preparing for what could be coming, and they're reactivating some overflow tents used during the pandemic.
We want to be ready for our patients. And these tents are nothing new. All the hospital systems have some sort of tent formation. The idea for the tent is really not for a place for patients to be cared for on a long-term basis. It's really a screening tent.
Scripps Health and Sharp Healthcare have used similar tents over the last couple of years and are still using them. Flu season has only just started, but 3,000 cases reported last month is already more than the last several Octobers. It's not too late to turn the situation around. Sang is encouraging everyone to get their flu shots.
We're hoping that the vaccination can kind of drop or push that curve down so it could be an easy early up, but also early down. That's the best case scenario.
Hospital administrators are preparing for a winter that will have COVID-19, the flu, and RSV all circulating at once. COVID-related hospitalizations remain relatively low, but officials are anticipating some type of a winter surge. Sang says with holiday gatherings around the corner, situational awareness is key.
If there are a lot of people around, you know someone's going to probably have an infection. Maybe they're not symptomatic yet. So in close, crowded places, just put your mask on.
When it comes to RSV, cases usually start rising in December, but it's hitting San Diego early this year. Sang says there's another twist. RSV typically infects children up to 3 years old, but he says right now, kids as old as 6 are presenting with the flu-like illness. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Nearly 1 week after the election, the 49th congressional district race is still too close to call. As KPBS's Alexander Nguyen reports, the balance of power in the House of Representatives could be determined by a few key races here in California.
Let's just get through the election, okay? They haven't won yet.
It's not over until it's over. With millions of ballots left to count in California, the results could shift the balance of power in Congress. The state is a Democratic stronghold, but UC San Diego political science professor Thad Kauser says Republicans can still edge out a few wins.
We aren't entirely blue. There are purple pockets, and there are, of course, red pockets.
One of those wins could be here. Incumbent Mike Levin is leading in the 49th congressional district that spans North Coast of San Diego and South Orange County. And there are still enough votes out there that it could swing the other way. With control of the Senate secured over the weekend, Democrats are now looking to keep control of the House.
There are about a half dozen races in California that are close enough, and the balance between Democrats and Republicans nationally in the House races is close enough that California's races will probably determine the outcome.
The GOP currently has 212 seats, Democrats 204. The number needed to control the House is 218. For a chance to retain the House, Democrats need to pick up wins in districts 13, 22, 27, 41, and 47. The 13th district is in the Central Valley and is a statistical dead heat with fewer than 100 votes separating Democrat Adam Gray and Republican John Duarte. The 47th is in Orange County, and incumbent Katie Porter is leading, but Republican challenger Scott Baugh has a strong showing. The 41st is in Riverside County. Incumbent Ken Calvert is leading, but Democratic challenger Will Rollins can still make up the difference.
But both Orange County and Riverside have sort of demographic shifts. One thing we see is districts that have a higher college-educated population have shifted toward the Democrats in the last couple of years.
Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Voters overwhelmingly passed a measure to allow childcare at San Diego parks and rec centers. KPBS reporter Claire Tregesser looks at what happens next.
They identified 72 sites, and 42 of the 72 are parks and recreation centers throughout the city.
Councilmember Raul Campillo championed Measure H. It will change the city's charter so the city can lease space to childcare businesses,
providing the option for childcare providers to have this space that would be potentially cheaper than building their own facilities or renting out for-profit facilities that might charge them more.
He says the idea is to give cheaper leases than what is commercially available, but he can't promise that. The city council has to approve any leases of 3 years or more.
If it's less than 3 years, the mayor's office can't approve it. And if it's an extension of a lease that's already in place, it does have to come to the city council. So I anticipate that each of these leases will come to the city council.
Campillo says as of right now, the plan is not to save any of these childcare slots specifically for city employees.
But we do look for ways to expand that benefit to our employees. Right now, I'm more concerned about analyzing the specific parks and recreation centers that can have childcare slots so that families that live in those neighborhoods will look to a nearby park where they can drop their child off before work and be able to pick up after work without having to drive way out of the way from where they live.
The measure's success sends a message about what voters want. So says Courtney Baltiski, the director of advocacy for the San Diego YMCA.
We need to be prioritizing parents and caregivers and really see them in their struggles to nurture and care for children at the same time that they are working and supporting our local economies.
Next, she's looking to see council members prioritize funding for childcare in the city budget.
But the hope is that this is a nudge for all council members and the mayor to consider what these facilities need to get up and running to house licensed childcare. And then we'll definitely need to see facilities funding for tenant improvements in these spaces. Even funding that would help with deeper exploration in knowing which facilities may be in childcare deserts.
Some childcare sites could be running in city parks and rec centers next year. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
And we are covering all the major local and state races on our website, kpbs.org. You can find the latest election results as well as our reporting. You can just click on the KPBS Voter Hub on our homepage. President Joe Biden called for cooperation, not confrontation, during his first face-to-face meeting with China's president since taking office. As Mike Valerio reports, the meeting comes at a critical time.
The stakes between the superpowers could not have been higher. A potential openness to repairing relations signaled with a handshake between President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
We had an open and candid conversation about our intentions and our priorities.
Tensions over Taiwan took center stage, Biden warning Xi against further provocations towards the island. Following the talk, Biden said he did not interpret any imminent attempt by China to invade.
I made it clear that we want to see cross-strait issues peacefully resolved, and so it never has to come to that.
Xi stated after the marathon meeting, Taiwan is the first red line that must not be crossed. Biden turning the focus to mutual economic goals.
We're going to compete vigorously, but I'm not looking for conflict. I'm looking to manage this competition responsibly.
And North Korea, amid concerns over continued saber-rattling, Biden said he's uncertain if Beijing has the capacity to influence Pyongyang's nuclear pursuits.
I made it clear to President Xi Jinping that I thought they had an obligation to attempt to make it clear to North Korea that they should not engage in long-range nuclear tests.
The president also using the global stage to tout American democratic ideals as midterm results further crystallized.
And the American people prove once again that democracy is who we are.
Mike Valerio, KPBS News.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Chris Magnus has resigned. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas asked Magnus to resign last week, which he initially refused. But on Saturday, the White House press secretary said in a statement that President Biden had accepted the commissioner's resignation and thanked him for his service to the agency. Magnus had been criticized internally as being out of touch with the agency and publicly for the handling of the U.S.-Mexico border. A steady decline in gas prices in San Diego County just in time for any upcoming road trips. According to AAA, today the price of a gallon dropped 0.7 cents to its lowest price since September 21st at $5.48. It has dropped by nearly $1 since the record price of $6.44 on October 5th. Still, the price is 85 cents per gallon more than it was a year ago. A new 195-unit affordable housing complex is now open in City Heights. While it's already making a big difference for people who were able to move in, there's still a need for more across the county. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer talked with some experts about what it would take to get more built.
Yeah, it's working. Almost.
The Harris Family Senior Residence and Mid-City Family Apartments in City Heights are officially open. Like almost all affordable housing offerings in the region, it's completely full with a long waiting list. Aurora Anaya lives in the new complex with her family of 6, after previously cramming into a one-bedroom apartment.
We were in the situation where we had to rent out the bedroom to other individuals or other families as well, because it was just too expensive for us to pay to even afford somewhere to live. And so now having to move into a now 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment is just amazing.
The San Diego Housing Commission's Colin Miller acknowledges many San Diegans are still in situations like Anaya used to be, especially with rising rent prices, and more needs to be done.
The housing that we're looking at today, if this is affordable housing, we really need investments from the state and from the federal government to help have more of an influx of capital into the region so we can afford to build more projects like this one.
Serving Seniors CEO Paul Downey says the issue of affordable housing is particularly challenging for older populations, many of whom are becoming homeless, like Sylvia Martinez used to be before moving into the new development. She says many seniors are still unhoused, in cars or on the streets.
There has to be something to speed up that to get the homeless help because their health deteriorates.
To make more units like this available in the city of San Diego, we're going to need more funding and we're going to need more land.
Sandig says the region needs over 170,000 housing units built within this decade. Last year, just over 10,000 units were built. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
High wind watches are in place for roughly 10 million people across Southern California. Forecasters say the region needs to be on alert for strong Santa Ana winds this week. Threats of wind damage and wildfire dangers are expected to peak between tomorrow and Wednesday. Meteorologist Justin Povic has more on its impact here in San Diego County, along with your full forecast.
Warmer air on the move, along with that some very gusty winds as we work our way into Tuesday night, and especially heading in toward Wednesday over the interior. And then we could see some more chill later on this week, heading into and through the upcoming weekend. There's some high wind watches out as you go back throughout the interior, throughout the mountains and into the high desert, stretching north into many of the San Bernardino County mountains, Los Angeles County mountains, but again off to our east too. Satellite and radar, very dry air currently in place, and we're going to be talking about a relatively quiet night and no precipitation coming in. Dry San Diego down to 50, Chula Vista into the upper 40s, Mount Laguna falling off into the mid 30s. And yes, they're going to stay a little bit on the cool side here as we work our way into Tuesday, but some changes are coming up as we go down the road toward the immediate shoreline. We're going to see those temperatures quickly begin to warm back up close to normal here as we go into Tuesday afternoon. A little above normal, Oceanside 69, Borrego Springs at 72, 55 toward Mount Laguna. And then we start to see that wind direction changing. This driving offshore flow is going to warm us up. That very dry air descending off the higher train, it compresses, it warms up. And we could see some winds quite gusty here as you work your way off to the east and the northeast. Some of these gusts over 40, 50 miles per hour. And this can make for some very difficult and dangerous driving conditions. And again, as that air is pushed offshore, we're going to be talking about some warmth at the coast and throughout some of the interior western valleys as we go into Wednesday. And no low cloudiness here at the coast. Look at this. We're going to see that drier air make its way on out. There's your warmth. Tuesday into Wednesday at the coast, we're talking low to mid 70s. A little cooler later on this week, though it does stay dry. Inland locations also into some of those valleys. We're going to be talking about the breezes on Wednesday and the warmth with highs up into the 70s. Mountainous locations, very gusty winds as I showed you on Wednesday. Those winds begin to back off. A little cooler here heading in toward the weekend and quite breezy here, but cool throughout the deserts as we go into the next couple of days. We'll stay dry into the weekend. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povic.
For the first time in Disneyland's history, characters in wheelchairs will be part of the cast. 2 dolls on the It's a Small World ride were introduced on Friday to represent characters with disabilities. It was a project 1.5 years in the making for what the resort says is looking for opportunities for inclusion. The It's a Small World attraction was opened at the park in Anaheim in 1966. In Shakespeare's romantic comedy As You Like It, Rosalind and Orlando meet at court but don't truly find love until they're banished to the forest. As KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando shows us, Jolla Playhouse gives us a reimagined play where identities can be fully explored through a cast of trans, non-binary, and queer performers.
Shakespeare's getting turned on his head over at La Jolla Playhouse.
I swear this is Shakespeare, believe it or not.
But the Bard's Forest of Arden will look and sound a little different.
We apologize for the little beeping of the, it's actually them building the set.
While a reimagined forest is being built outside, some deconstruction is happening inside the rehearsal room.
Find somebody you are not with at any other time and take them to the woods.
Take the court versus forest motif. Elizabethan audiences would have seen it as restriction versus freedom, perhaps even Protestant versus Catholic. But how could that be redefined for a modern audience?
And so for us, our production is the binary court and the free genderful forest.
As dramaturg, Regina Victor has some key duties. Okay, learning how to wrestle is part of their duties understudying the role of Orlando. But as dramaturg, Victor is responsible for world building in a new play, historical context for an old one, and acting as a playwright's advocate, even if he's dead.
What do I think Shakespeare would have wanted? What was his intention in writing the story? And how can our interpretation honor that without distracting from it?
So while gender fluidity is being discussed in the rehearsal room,
This moment is this like community, joy-forward, queer moment.
it wasn't a topic of discussion in Shakespeare's time. But the Bard obviously wanted to play with ideas about gender and identity, since he wrote the part of Rosalind to be played by a boy, who then has to dress like a woman, who then disguises herself as a man, who pretends to be a woman so that the man she secretly loves can woo her.
What Shakespeare's original productions had to do, that this one also has to do, is get down to the essence of the person. Peter, who's playing Rosalind, talks a lot about in the forest, I become a lover. And that identity transcends gender.
Christopher Ashley is one of the play's co-directors.
I would say our production is even more genderful than original productions because we have this amazing group of actors, trans actors and non-binary actors and queer actors, and there's all of these options for how does this production construct the possibilities for that character.
What would happen if Rosalind, in fact, was not pivoting from one thing to another, and no one else was seeing her in that way, but that actually she was shedding an idea, shedding a binary idea, and actually her experience in the woods is accumulative, that she's becoming more and more herself, which is more and more complex.
And what if that was reflected through the costumes?
That in this production, Rosalind starts to shed layers, courtly layers, and then starts to accumulate other things, and that we're watching her transform over time.
Co-director Will Davis adds that other characters also get to shed layers they don't want and give them to someone else who might look great wearing them, because the image we choose to present can have an impact.
The more I can imagine something and believe in what I'm imagining about myself and for myself, the more the world is going to respond to that.
And I think that's kind of threaded through the entire piece, where there are moments where the gender play with Rosalind is really an invitation to other people that, like, just because you present one way doesn't mean your gender has stopped. It doesn't mean you've arrived at. It means that you are now fluid between, and that's been really exciting.
It's also exciting to hear the music reimagined. But the text of Shakespeare's play has not really been altered, even when Rosalind's epilogue returns to the binary language of male and female.
Because what ended up being more delightful was giving this trans performer the ability to put that gender panic back on the audience. And to say, like, it's not actually for me to make sense of this for you. It is actually for me to invite you to make sense of it yourself.
Shakespeare's plays have proven endlessly adaptable because they're not about the past.
Their main thing is the human imagination and the possibility of human relationships, which feels like it never dates.
So let La Jolla Playhouse take you to its genderful forest, where you might experience Shakespeare from a fresh perspective. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
La Jolla Playhouse's As You Like It opens tomorrow, November 15th, and then it runs through December 11th at the Potecker Theater.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Biden meets his Chinese counterpart in person for the first time since taking office. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's another look at today's top stories. Researchers and student employees who work at all 10 University of California campuses are on strike. 7,700 academic workers walked off of the job at UC San Diego demanding more pay and fair labor practices. The UC president's office issued a statement saying the university looks forward to continuing negotiations in good faith and settling the contracts as quickly as possible. San Diego hospitals are preparing for a winter that will have COVID-19, the flu, and RSV all circulating at once. In anticipation of what could be coming, overflow tents are being reactivated at Kaiser this week. Local hospitals say they will continue using them as needed to screen patients for respiratory viruses. And more election results have been just posted. In the 49th Congressional District, Democratic incumbent Mike Levin is leading over his Republican challenger Brian Marriott with over 52% of the vote. The district straddles San Diego and Orange counties. There are still 80,000 ballots to be counted in San Diego County. And here is a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. NPR's Morning Edition looks at the health of the Amazon rainforest as a newly elected president promises stronger protections. And then on KPBS Midday Edition checks on the status of the strike by UC student workers and researchers at campuses across California. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.